Welcome, everyone, to Lead Wisco, where we talk about leadership and faith and how those two worlds intersect through people's stories. We're excited that some of you are joining on, and we keep saying like, comment, and share. But Ryan, I'm excited to do this again with you and learn.
And that's kind of what we set out to do. And I'm getting a thread every time we go through these. I'm literally in each one of them, there's a specific thread that really speaks to me. And you know, we've had a number of variant guests, and each one of them, I'm learning how to apply that weekly, which I guess that's part of the job, is that we're learners too, right? I mean, we're asking good questions. So I've enjoyed it.
Oh, that's so good. I know that you do this, you set out and you think you're doing something for everybody else, but then you realize, wow, I'm gaining.
It's for us too.
Yeah, and learning myself. Well, this is another friend. I am excited to introduce you guys to Traci Newkirk. She has a professional career that spans about 25 years. She's been in public relations, sales, marketing, corporate. I know her through some speaking engagements that I did, but I got to meet her and her husband, Barry, and their two daughters, a great family. What intrigues me and what I felt like we needed to hear from Traci today, her story and how she's landing where she's landing today. She's right now in a master's program that kind of brings in theology, neuroscience, psychology, and kind of leadership mashed together. She's got 9 certifications, some of that in Enneagram, in Strength Finders, and she is like a ball of energy. If you know much about Strength Finders, she's on adrenaline woo, which means, she'll be fun to talk to. But I just felt like, gosh, she has something to offer to our podcast. So, hey, welcome, Traci, to be with us here at Lead Wisco.
Hey, Traci.
Well, hey guys, how are you guys doing?
We're well, better because you're here.
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, if that's all it takes, then hey, I'll pop in every day.
Yep, we're pretty easy. Well, I know I didn't give all of the things about what you're doing. Can you just give us a little bit? I know we did previous when we talked, but tell us what you're working on right now. We'll get to your backstory, but I'd love just to hear, why are you interested in this program that you're in right now? And tell us a little bit about it. Give us some texture on what's this really about.
Sure. You're speaking specifically about the master's program?
Yes.
Well, truthfully, it's been a dream of mine ever since I graduated from college. And, I graduated over 30 years ago.
No.
And it was rare. Yes.
No.
It was rare that a woman went on to get her master's. So for me, I just wanted like womanhood, rah, rah, I wanted to get my master's program for that. Then I really kind of draw it back and said, like, why? I mean, am I going to spend all that money just for this piece of paper? And so I've been on this 30-year quest to say, what do I want to learn and who do I want to be when I grow up? And in a sense, I wanted to find something that blended my faith and my desire to lead people, and then give me some, I guess, theory behind it so I could understand. I've made some snafus in my leadership, and then I've done some things I think that I've done pretty well, but I don't really know the theory behind it. Like, why did it work? And so I found this program, the Townsend Institute out of Irvine, California. And because of COVID, it's online. So as God is gracious, He's allowed me to join this program. And it's been really good.
So what's the integration, Traci? Tell us about what it integrates, because it's quite unique.
Yeah, so it integrates theology first. And so we always start with scripture. And we're looking at Jesus's leadership, who he was, and how he executed that leadership and how he walked it out. And then they kind of support that with the psychology behind it. And then underneath that is also the neuroscience. What in our brain really attracted people to Jesus, what he was using that was creating a mismatching experience that people made them want to go, I'm going to drop what I'm doing and make a 180-degree turn and follow this man that I barely know. And so there's all kinds of things wrapped up in that, grace, truth, and time. One thing that I'm learning, grace is the anesthesia, truth is the surgery, and then the time is how long you've known someone, your ability to get up on their, I guess, stretcher and to let them perform this surgery on you. And
Wow.
yet Jesus did all three of that so beautifully, so quickly. And it's just the study of that.
So maybe what Ryan and maybe some of the watchers and listeners don't know is that you and your husband started a business, ICAP, and you guys have been really successful. And so we're talking about faith, and yet I don't know if that freedom for you to work in the corporate world is so easily integrating faith. But tell us how you do that,
Yeah,
because
that's good.
this is an interesting conversation about how you're integrating your faith into your leadership. What does that look like in your guys' business?
Well, I mean, truthfully, we don't know how not to do it. And that's just the truth. We actually consulted an HR consultant to say, hey, we need to pray. Is that going to get us in trouble? And she's like, no, it's consistently about who you are. So keep doing it. So for us, it's worked out that we've been able to read books by Christian authors with our staff on leadership, and talk about, we're reading a book right now. Here, I'll get it, called Integrity. One of the best books I've read here lately. You can see how much I've dog-eared it, but we're reading that with our staff over 3 months. And that's been a way that we've taken our faith and our work life and integrated the two together. I think the other thing that we've really tried to do is care well about people, and not just say it, not just put it on a placard as an artifact in our office, but really during COVID, it gave us a time to demonstrate our faith and demonstrate our care for others by the way we took care of people during COVID. We didn't lay anybody off. We were super sensitive to their needs. If we had a staff member and their husband, for instance, who were sick, we were sending meals to them at night. So we really tried to use this opportunity that God gave us during COVID to put our faith on display in our actions.
Did this ever receive any resistance? Maybe that's the way I would want to say it. Did you find there were some people maybe that you've had over the years that you've employed and said, hey, I really don't want this faith thing? And I know you're from the South, you're in Greenville, South Carolina, and maybe us Northerners think everybody goes to church down there, but it's not really true. So tell us if you had resistance at all, where there's a pushback about, hey, I don't need faith or I don't want any.
I think in my consulting business, I've had to be tentative with it, especially when I'm working with a client. Strength finders is basically, here are your natural talents, natural God-given talents of who you are. And so when I'm teaching that, of course, I always use that language, but I also say, I want you to understand that for me, my faith and who God has made you to be go hand in hand. You can choose to accept that or reject that, but your talents are what they are. And so I just try to use it in an integrated way when I'm working with a person without it being offensive. If they had asked me not to do it, I certainly would not have talked about God when I'm working with a team on team building, but it just naturally comes up.
So I know Ryan's going to dive here in a minute, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your consulting business then? Tell us a little bit about your Enneagram and your Strength Finders integration and how you use that. And you have a few certifications around that, but what are you doing with people with those two kind of models?
Well, it started when I homeschooled my kids because I was fascinated with the way that they both learned. I have two daughters, and they both learned so differently. So I could provide one piece of curriculum and one daughter could do really well at it and the other daughter struggled. And so I became this pursuer of what makes people tick. How do children learn? How do adults learn? And so I started out about, I guess, 10 or 12 years ago with a Strengths Finder certification, which was really helpful. Then that led to DISC certification, team building, crucial conversations, Enneagram, lead like Jesus. I don't know. I became maybe a junkie about it, to be honest. Each of the certifications, though, tell us something different. And that's how I like to use that in consulting. For instance, Strength Finders tells you how. How do you get your job done at your job? But Enneagram might tell you what might trip you up in the workplace setting. And DISC might also show you something else, and it might show you this is how you're being stressed or stretched. So all three personality assessments can be helpful in a person's self-awareness journey.
How have you, Troy mentioned this journey that you're on, theology, the intersection of that, faith, psychology, and neuroscience. With what you just described, I don't know how you can bridge both of those two, but I'm fascinated when you're talking leadership and neuroscience and theology and faith, all this intersecting like that. Like, I don't know how you bring that all full circle, but what you're learning from those elements over here and this journey with this master's thing that you're doing, can you give me some real-time examples of walking that out between the intersection of all this stuff that you're learning? Like, anything come to mind?
Sure. I can tell you exactly what I did today. How about that?
That works.
So I had a session with a young lady today, 4 sessions, and we've been uncovering, it's called a self-awareness session. And through that session, we're looking at strengths, Enneagram, blind spots, weaknesses, values, and spiritual talents. So all of that I put together. I thought I had it maybe right in front of me. Oh, I do. So we put together this poster, and then at the end we write a personal mission statement based on all of that. And what I feel like is the Bible talks about that a person has deep waters and that someone wise can draw it out. And I'm sure I'm not saying that correctly. And my job, I feel like in the consulting, is to help people draw out their deep waters, to think well and long about themselves, about what motivates them, demotivates them, what trips them up in the workforce, but also couple that in with their spiritual gifts, their calling, their passions, and then help them to write a mission statement that will project them into the future, that they can say, this is who I am, and this is who I am at home, with my friends, with my family, at work, and integrate all of that together. And I feel like, going back to my master's, that real adulthood is the ability to differentiate yourself, to know your strengths, your values, to find your way, to find your purpose, to find your mission in life. And that's part of healthy adulthood.
Can you speak? I'm going to speak to those who are scientifically inclined. But when you talk neuroscience, neural pathways, and like, I don't know if Pastor Troy, I don't know if anybody I called you Pastor Troy. We agreed we weren't going to do that. It's Ryan and Troy. But we stumble across people in our churches or wherever, and you're in your leadership, there are people who are scientifically inclined. Can you speak to the person watching who is, when you use the word neural science, can you speak a little more to that aspect of this master's you're talking about?
Yes, let me see if I can do it justice. So the woman at the well, when Jesus met her, he used a mismatching experience. And his mismatching experience that he used created a different pathway in her brain where she could go out and become a new person.
Wow.
And we don't know how long Jesus was at the well with this woman, right? We have no idea. But we know that at the well that he gave her grace and he gave her truth, but he also did it in such a way that she felt so loved that she went out and said, hey, I met a man and he knew everything about me, and I want you to meet him. It wasn't used in any condemnation. It wasn't used to shame her, but she felt empowered by this new, I guess, lane in her brain that he had created during this experience. And she took that information and then led people back to him.
There may be people who've never heard this before. They're like, neural pathways, faith, what? Like, can you speak to the specific science that you're talking about there, like what you've learned?
I don't know that I might can do that part justice without my notes, so I
Gotcha.
apologize.
No problem.
I apologize with that. I just know that there are mismatching experiences that can be used in the workforce and in our churches in the way
Okay.
that we interact with people. And it creates a different pathway in a person's brain. And that new
That makes sense.
pathway enables them to change and be different
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
future.
And some of the books I've read on this, because I'm not an expert either, but it's called The Other Half of Church, or The Other Side of Church, I believe, is some of these guys work on discipleship. And I don't know if
Awesome.
you picked that up, but
Yeah.
he talks about, and I did a series on this at the church called The Speed of Joy, because he says you enter a room and your right brain is actually operating much quicker and faster than your left. Your left can put words to it, but you're feeling and reading a relational connect way before and hyperspeed than you are with words. So I think the really interesting part of that is we think, like Traci's suggesting, it's just about getting truth out.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, that's not true. Jesus created some sort of environment, and I'm going to add to. I wasn't in your class, but I'm guessing Jesus adds a right brain experience with her that she's picking up on, that he doesn't force truth at her right away. But what does he do? I think, again, she felt grace. She must have felt, right?
Yeah,
You
right.
feel before you think. She had to
Right.
feel things in the room,
Yes.
in that space with him, that allowed him then to bring
That's really
truth and revelation, and then healing, quite frankly, which is so fascinating. So this right and left brain reality. And I do want to say, for listeners who that might freak you out, oh my gosh, you can't bring science into this. And I just want you to say, I am not afraid of science.
I'm not either.
Science actually is just, I think, more acclaimed to what God's done.
Yeah, come on.
God created an amazing brain. I have a neuroscience doctor at our church. He's a neurologist, and he said to me once, we were talking about brain science, because I had him read this book with me before I taught about some of it. I said, is this legit? He said, Troy, there is more we don't know about the brain than we actually do know, because it's one of the most powerful and mysterious creations God's created. And so, you think about EMDR, which is work about finding kind of where you filed trauma memories, and
Yeah.
I mean, all this stuff affects us. And so some people go, oh my gosh, no, it's just about Jesus and just about Jesus. Yeah, your brain is about Jesus. How you think about Jesus and how you think about theology is really important. How you feel about those things is important.
Can I play off what you just said there? And
Yeah, are
bring
you
Traci
interviewing
in?
me now? Traci, please interview me.
Traci, I want to bring you in on this. It's just had a thought, and that we said inspired thought when we have things fire off. But let me throw this example at you and bring it into the workplace for both of you. So do you remember, like, when Peter denied Jesus 3 times by a fire? Do you remember that? Later in the book of John, speaking to experiential Troy, I mean, this just kind of came to me. Jesus restores him by cooking food by a fire. So his new memory of being by a fire is different. His experience mentally, physically, and emotionally is by a fire. Now, is it a coincidence? I don't know. But for your senses and the neurology of it, she's shaking her head. I might be onto something here. Can you speak to that? Or
Well,
both
wait,
of you?
let's just say it's not just fire.
It's the senses, or I don't know.
Well, yeah, it was fish.
It was fish too.
It was by the Sea of Galilee, but he asks him 3 times,
He restores him 3 times. Yeah,
which was
that's huge.
really what happened to him 3 times. So
So it's all of it.
yeah.
So you just gave a mismatching experience.
Yeah.
So Jesus wanted to create a mismatching experience again so that Peter would forget about the denial and remember about the time by the sea.
Yeah.
Because I think what is happening to us as people is we keep going back to the way things have always been, or the way we've always done things, or our childhood state, right? And yet I feel like what Jesus is teaching us is how to relate to people and cause them to have a new experience and go out and not live out of that old self.
Yeah, and I want to
so
pick
good.
up maybe and
Self-created.
have you add to this, because I think you said something about adulthood is differentiating yourself. And my wife and I just went to some more marriage therapy, and one of the big conversations is that we can't have true face-to-face connection without true differentiation. That means
Yes.
without us knowing who we are apart from each other, we have nothing to offer each other truly of who we are.
Wow.
So
Yes.
I would say, why don't you talk about that? Because why don't you talk about it in this way, Traci? Tell us your journey of differentiating and what were some of the hang-ups you were stuck in to try to find who God's made Traci.
Well, let's see, which story do you want? First of all, I'm studying character structure a lot, and it speaks about bonding and attachment. Number one, most important. Number two would be the ability to be separate. Number three, the ability to integrate, holding the hard and the good all at the same time, and then that all builds healthy adulthood. So everything you're sharing, Troy, is what I'm studying about in my master's, but it's these levels that you go through. So if I take that and then take that back in my life, I would say that part of my issue, and this is just me being totally vulnerable, is that my husband, I've always seen as my savior. And I've put him in a place sometimes that is unhealthy. And so part of me growing in this 31-year marriage and owning a business together is removing him from the pedestal of savior and putting him in his right place. Does that make sense? And so that means that I've had to learn to bond with him in a healthy way. I've had to learn to be separate from him, in that we're together but separate. I have my own interest and he has his own interest. And his interests shouldn't overtake my interests, and my interests shouldn't overtake his. And then the ability to integrate the hard things in our marriage without it ruining, right? Without me throwing my hands up in the air and saying everything is ruined because you said these hateful words to me on a Saturday night, right? It's the ability to hold both. And then the ability to be adults and have passions that are maybe similar together, but also chances are separate, and what it's like to support each other in those passions and in friendships that we know are good for one another. Because we know that God made him beautiful and equal and different from me, and he made me the same way. And so that's the journey I guess I've been on, is not attaching to him like I did when I was so young, in such a way that I saw him as my protector and my savior, and he made me feel safe, and he still makes me feel safe, but it's in a much healthier way now. That was probably too much. Sorry.
Oh, no, it wasn't at all. In fact, I kind of want more. I want to know, where did you pick that, I would say, lie or wrong strategy about getting married? Like, that came out of your story somehow, and we've talked about this. And I'm not saying dishonor anybody in your family, but maybe there's some experiences or things you learned about you and spouses. So could you tell us something about your past that's really informed this new discovery about yourself?
I think it is a generational thing, if I can really pinpoint one area, and that my generation was taught submission. A woman's place was to be seen and not heard. That the man was the lead. I believe all of those things are true in a healthy sense, but
Yeah.
I think there was some legalism,
Mm.
and some pushing down. So when I got married, I had a lot of unhealthy views about ways that a marriage should look like.
Mm.
And of course, Barry came from something completely different. We were both from broken homes, and our broken homes certainly informed us. But I would try to, let's go to separate. If he said scrambled eggs were the best scrambled eggs, then of course I like scrambled eggs. And if he liked USC, then of course I liked USC, because that's what you did, right?
Right.
You just integrated into who your husband's personality was, and you just became an
So
extension
you
of
lost
him.
yourself. There was no Traci really until
The
recent.
two became him.
The two became him, 100%. Now that is not what he wanted. So I would tell you that he's been the biggest cheerleader of Traci growing up to be an adult. But along the way, it came where, and by the way, I'm a Enneagram 2 and my husband's an Enneagram 8. So as you can
I
see,
love
those
eights.
two things I love 8s too. As you can see how those two things would come to play. I'm the two with a three wing. I'm the hostess, right? But at the same time, it was easy for me to lose myself kind of in who he was and his big personality. But at the same time, I really believe that his pushing, constant pushing of me toward God, toward the scriptures, toward my calling, towards passions, have really grown me into who I am now. And I will remember we were sitting at a restaurant, and one of my students came up, and I jumped up, hugged him, and embraced him with my woo self, and sat down. And he said, that glitter in your eye, that's what I want you to do. I want you to find a career where that glitter in your eye is 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I'm going to set my course to help you find that.
That's so good. So good. Give us a couple pictures then, Traci, of obviously your leadership has been forming. It's still forming. You're in this learning stage in this master's program. I imagine, the way you're wired, and I know you're learning even as you're doing this for other people, but you're probably learning in the process. But can you give us maybe one or two experiences where it was a big fail, or at least you perceived it was a big crash and burn as you as a leader, but you learned something pretty significant?
I guess I'll give you the one that's not tied up with a bow. I think sometimes the experience while I'm still learning is important. I think as a manager, it's been really important that I understand that my job is to bless and release people, that they come into my employment and I can develop them and care for them and teach them and give them opportunities. But at the end of the day, the chances are that they are going to leave me and go somewhere else. And I think that has been a leadership fail for me. I think I'm getting better at it, but learning to bless and release people who I've poured a lot of time and money and investment in, and releasing them in a way that's healthy. And without taking it personally, without feeling like, hey, they should be loyal to me. Woos love loyalty, and I do love loyalty. But I've got to integrate that loyalty in a healthy way to say, hey, I want you to grow and change and move, and I'm going to celebrate you when you move on, but I'm going to invest in you like you're going to stay. So those are some ways that I haven't done that well, and that, I probably have some embarrassment, maybe even some shame about, but I feel like I'm doing it better now from learning the hard stuff.
We don't ever feel that way as church leaders.
Never.
Like, we feel like we can lead them and bless them and they can go away. We never feel like they abandoned us and quit on us and they went to the church across the street.
That's never happened.
Oh my gosh.
No. I do have a question along the lines you were speaking to. I just felt like there may be somebody watching or listening right now that you spoke to the empowerment side of you investing in them. Let's flip it around and say the people you've invested in are not responding to you, and you've done all that you can, and you have now a crucial conversation that may lead to a necessary ending. There may be somebody watching here today. How does a woo person who's loyal release someone who really needs to seek excellence elsewhere? However, that's never easy for anybody on any level. I felt like there's somebody that's going to be watching that needs to hear what you carry on how to do that properly.
So I have also the Strength Finder talent of developer. And developer, we waste time on low potential people. It's just the truth, right? And so I think it's the turning down of the developer and saying that I'm going to give a person a tour of duty with my company or my church. And we're going to establish that tour of duty up front. And then I'm going to, in that tour of duty, tell you what I'm going to do for you. And in that tour of duty, you're going to tell me what you're going to do, therefore do for the company. And sometimes that tour of duty needs to end early. And I think the wise people do hire slow and fire fast. And there are times that tour of duty needs to end early. And so I would just say to people, invest well, invest wisely, but know when it's time for them to move on and find another opportunity. because you're really filling the spot with someone maybe who's not engaged or who doesn't want to grow or who doesn't care about what you're having to say. And that's just the way people are. Some people are there for a paycheck. They're not there for the growth. No matter what Gallup tells us, there are some people there for a paycheck and not for
Okay.
potential.
Traci, I have a follow-up. So I call this I actually learned this from my dad, but it's the terror barrier. How did you break the terror barrier when you're going into that realm?
First, tell me more about the terror barrier.
The terror barrier is any place that your flesh, your emotions, and everything doesn't want to go, but you know you need to break. How have you learned to do that? And with faith intersecting with psychology, intersecting with neuroscience. Yes.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a work in progress, if I'm honest. I think doing it poorly has been a great teacher for me, just to be honest. I'd love to tell you that I had the ability to think well and plan well and be prepared for it, but it caught me a little bit off guard. And so pain is a good teacher, and it's been the good teacher to move forward. So I've made that mistake once of really being disappointed in their lack of loyalty. And now I've changed my paradigm. And instead I say, I know that eventually you will leave, and I want to wish you well in your leaving. And what can I do right now to support you? And the weird thing is, the more I support them and the more I say they're probably going to leave, it's weird. It's like the more they want to stay.
Yeah.
Maybe it's freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know I heard a mentor years ago teach me similar. It's the same concept, but said differently. If as a leader of a church, you don't learn how to send people, in your mind, they will always have left you.
Yes.
And I thought, and he said this to me, he said, and this was in my master's program, he said, no matter why they're leaving, you're going to have a mindset that they're being sent, whether by themselves, by God, or some other circumstance. And I just thought that was refreshing. So even in the painful leaves, I've had to learn how to, now, like you, Traci, I could say I've done this not well a lot of times. I mean, still someone may leave and I'm like, I'm mad, like really disloyal, and no longer a Christian. I'm just joking who anybody who's left. But it feels that way. Can I confess it feels very violating. So that has been something I'm learning too. So I appreciate your vulnerability there.
I appreciate yours because you just gave voice to something too. I appreciate both of you because it's the stuff that, well, you're the pastor, you can't have feelings about this. So, it's a part of it. But I think the main thing, what I heard was it was about others and making it about investing in others. It's not about always our emotions or how, it's not personal, but like I like, Troy, how you said at times it feels personal, and we need to be okay to give voice to say emotionally, I think, I feel this way. Doesn't mean it's the truth. It just means I have the right to say to Troy, I'm hurting now. Yeah. That's okay to say.
Yeah, it still hurts, and
it
hurts doesn't mean I'm taking it personally, because the personal part that's damaging, I think, to all of us is when we think, I did something wrong, I'm not enough, I did something that caused this. I mean, any of those, I think we're taking too much responsibility for, I think, what you're suggesting, Traci, which is beautiful, a natural just part of life. And, even when Paul says, and so, man, this might be the most spiritual Bible-ridden podcast we've done in a while, but when Paul says, some plant the seeds, I'm a paraphrase, some water, but ultimately it's God that lets things grow. It just informs me that I'm some part of a process, and I might have poured thousands of dollars into somebody. So one of the things we say around here that I think it would be fun to hear that from, well, maybe this is something that businesses I know can latch onto, no matter if it's faith-based or not. Our goal is to how do we leave them better than when we found them?
That's so good.
How do we say, gosh, we're going to invest in you in such a way that if you're only here for a year or 15, you're going to be so different and better for other people. And I will tell you, I actually love when people steal from people from us, from a staff level. I really mean that, because what it says is these people are valuable and we want them. And it says we're doing our job. So I count that as affirmation. I've been told by Christian organizations, our people are off limits. And I always find that interesting. I'm like, well, what? They're going to leave eventually if you keep doing that. But I'm just going, gosh, recruit from our team.
Yeah.
Because that tells us we're doing something pretty well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I do think that it also comes down to, as a leader, we have to be careful of not always needing to feel seen. And I find that there's a connection in that too, and that when someone leaves, it sometimes makes us feel that we haven't been seen, or that our efforts haven't been seen. And we have to, I guess, shore that up too, in our own integration of self, that we're not letting them hold our self-esteem too much in their coming or going.
Doesn't it question our why? Because if the string attached was, wait, look at all I did for you. And I've done this. I'm calling to mind some people I've held, like, I got to let go of this. Because what did I expect? Did I give it with an expectation of something back, or did I just give it? And it wasn't a gift of love if I didn't just give it to them, whatever that investment was. And yeah, those are challenging. Traci, tell us a little bit about, has there been some things in your journey in your life that you'd be willing to share and be vulnerable with that have grown you deeper in your faith and in your leadership? Is there anything else out there that, again, we kind of poke around and try to see how it might relate to someone else? Because I know you've lived a lot of life, and you and Barry have 2 great daughters. You've got a great journey, but is there anything that you just go, gosh, this happened and it taught myself or Barry and I or our family this?
Oh, goodness. I feel like this last year has given us a lot of material for this. Let's see. Well, we employ our daughter. And so I'll talk about that a little bit.
Family business.
We have a family business. And so some ways that we probably have done that well, we sat down with her for about the first 90 days and said, what do you expect of us? What do we expect of you, before she ever came into our employment? And I think that was very helpful, because we set some healthy boundaries around some areas. And one of those areas is that we don't personally manage her, that she has a different manager than her mom and dad. And so that's been very helpful. Ways that we probably haven't done things well is that in the same area, we've had to go to the manager and say, you need to talk to Savannah about X. And that has felt very disingenuous. It's felt very opposite of the way the Bible talks about going to someone and speaking to them first. So I feel like we've made some mistakes in that realm of trying to be good and healthy boundaries, but also maybe speaking to her directly and going to her directly and trying to work things out, and leaving people outside of our family who don't belong there. So that's probably a quick way. I'm not sure anybody relates to that, but just,
oh my gosh, I totally think there are.
Doing that well.
I mean, I work with my wife, and anybody in business that has a family member in business, this is
my
huge.
wife's on our staff, and we try not to have the intersection of, hey, what happened today at 8:00 at night when we're decompressing, and we don't need to be talking about business. We need to be talking about.
But even more so, because I'm realizing it's a Highwire Act. The Highwire Act is, I need to be a good leader and not treat anyone different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but wait, that's my wife, that's my daughter, that's my son, right? That's my husband. And the tension between, but wait, they are different. There is a different social contract. There's a different relationship there. And trying to find, probably going back to what you said, Traci, differentiation in the midst of that space without enmeshment is super, super, 3 supers.
Yeah.
So like
psychologically speaking, we've gone there.
It is so difficult. It really is. And that, to me, one of the guys that worked with us, Jack, Trish and I, he had us, and I'll just share this. This is his stuff, Jack Nicholson, not the actor, by the way.
Yeah.
Which you think about counseling in that framework would be so funny, right? You can't handle
Oh,
the truth
goodness,
screaming
yeah.
at you.
Handle the truth.
No, but what he said, I thought it was interesting. He had my wife and I stand back to back and said, talk to each other. And it's weird because you're looking in different directions. Then he had us stand shoulder to shoulder, and we were looking at this chart together. And then he said he had us stand face to face. He says, now, there is no necessary balance of the three. None of them are bad or better than the other. He said back to back is differentiation. You have two things you're looking at that are different. He said face to face is connection, is that soul connection. Shoulder to shoulder is the stuff you're working on your family. You're talking about the house project. You're talking about vacations. All this, it's team. So he asked us, what percentage of your connection is of those three? What's the percentages? Well, we said probably 80, sadly, maybe even sometimes 90% shoulder to shoulder. He said the problem with that is if you don't have differentiation, you will not have face-to-face. And so he said you're going to have to figure out how to do less shoulder to shoulder so that you can have differentiation. So to me, we're trying to learn that in the midst of being on a staff together, still super difficult. So I didn't give any answers other than I'm still at work.
I'm curious, like what would be your advice to that with, I mean, I know there's boundaries at play, obviously. And I'll be honest, I've violated those, to Troy's,
All the time. Yeah.
to Troy's comment there. I can literally, my wife Hope and I can remember a conversation. She goes, this was the phrase. Would you treat anyone on our team that way besides me? Meaning it wasn't like I was yelling at her. It wasn't like that, but it was like what she was poking the bear was, are you pulling a double standard with me, leveraging the fact that she's my wife? And then my first defense mechanism was, no, I'm fair. And then I stopped and thought about it. I'm like, kind of. And what we both unpacked was she was also doing that with me. Turnabout, fair play.
Yeah.
She was actually doing the same thing to me. What is that psychologically?
Isn't that like the need to go get counseling?
Yeah, probably.
That's like go get counseling.
We're aware.
Yeah, you're aware. I do think it goes back to the separateness, right? And I think the other thing is one of the things when I'm working with Savannah, I try to put the project or the problem on the other side of the table and have her be shoulder to shoulder to Troy's point of view to work on that problem, right? So she and I are attacking the problem together, right? The problem is not in the midst of us in the face-to-face. It is we're shoulder to shoulder, the problem's on the other side. But when she comes to our home on the weekends, we set up a boundary that we don't discuss work. We discuss her life, our marriage, our friends. We don't mention work. We just went on a vacation for a week with our 6 family members.
Which looked awesome, by the way.
It was awesome. Great. Not a hateful word spoke on the whole trip for all 7 days, but we never spoke about work at all. And for me, that's why I go back to separate, in that when separate is healthy, we should be able to have other conversations besides work. And that builds that face-to-face connection when we're going, hey, how's your life? How are you doing? How she started reffing, how's reffing going? That type of thing. But for me, I'll be vulnerable and say, when she presents a problem to me in front of our staff and it feels like that she's challenging me, that need to be seen creeps up. That Enneagram 3 creeps up, and I have to push that back down and remember that I need her brain. I need her challenge. And it's not from a lack of respect that she's saying this, but a desire that she wants our business to be better.
So good.
And that's been challenging for me. And that's what I'm personally working on.
I guarantee you there are many businesses out there who need to hear everything that you just said.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm a little nervous because Traci knows me a little bit too well. So she knows I'm an Enneagram 3 with a wing of 4. So I'm sure you could dissect me. In fact, we've had Traci up for our staff, and we'll leave it in the comments, but to get a hold of Traci to have her do work for staff, and just with Enneagram and Strength Finders, so good. So much energy around that about, I love how she said it, how you do your work in Strength Finders, and really leveraging how you get things done is so beautiful. And we're big fans of continue to learn about one another. And so I think Traci does great work.
That's really good.
Yeah. Traci, is there anything else you just love to share with business owners or women of faith? We just interviewed another gal last week, but I want to be careful to say you're a leader. Whether you're man or woman, you're a leader. So I don't just say speak to women, but as a woman leading, what else would you want to tell leaders?
I'd say what is acted upon changes. So I think in our leadership, what we focus on, we fix. What we focus on grows. And so learning to act upon intentionally the right things is important. And I think that comes with some self-awareness, understanding maybe what's holding you back, understanding what's keeping you from reaching your life's mission statement. Write a mission statement. Decide now how you want to be remembered. Decide now what you want said at your funeral. And then create some stretch goals and some plans in order to help get you there. But remember that you've got to identify it before it can change.
Yeah, that's so good.
I love it.
Good stuff.
Dynamo.
Traci, thank you so much for spending time with us. There you go. Thank you spending time with us, us Northerners. Man,
My
and
pleasure.
we'll make sure we put in the comments some of her contact info. But man, thanks again, Traci. And yeah, another episode here of Lead Wisco, Ryan. Just again, learning. It feels like we keep doing this selfishly just so we can. It's like our own little seminary master's class.
And learning.
Yeah. So I hope that's same for you guys. Please like, comment, share any of these. If you have suggestions about who we need to interview, of someone that has a story where leadership and faith intersect, please get a hold of us. Otherwise, we'll see you soon.
Hey everyone. Thanks so much for listening today. We hoped you enjoyed Traci's leadership lessons and learned more about the intersection of faith, leadership, neuroscience, and psychology. If this episode was helpful to you, we'd be so grateful if you subscribed or followed us, left us a review, or shared our podcast with someone you think may benefit from it. If you're looking for more leadership content, check out our social media. We post snippets of these episodes, leadership development resources, and more. If there's someone you think would be a great guest for us to talk to, message us on social media or send us an email at leadwisco@gbcc.me. Thanks for listening.